Awesome. So my name is Gillian Flippo, and I am the Stewardship Coordinator with Puget Soundkeeper. And
my name is Alyssa Barton. I'm the Policy Manager with Puget Soundkeeper. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us today.
Yeah, and so today we'll be first talking about the problems that we're seeing in the field in terms of cleanups and the types of trash we're seeing, diving a little deeper into international coastal cleanup and some of the results that we've been seeing this year and in the past years, and then diving into what Alyssa will be talking about, the main part of the webinar, the solutions and the legislation. And so before we get into what Puget Soundkeeper does, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of many Salish peoples who were and continue to be stewards of these lands and waters. So why don't we begin the presentation and start with the first slide, talking a little bit about Puget Soundkeeper. So our mission is to protect and enhance the waters of Puget Sound for the health and restoration of the aquatic ecosystems and the communities that depend on them. And we're on the water every week, enforcing the Clean Water Act, cleaning up harmful debris, and partnering on solutions for a cleaner sound. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be giving you all a brief overview of international coastal cleanup and share some of our results from this year. We are the regional coordinators for international coastal cleanup. So we train beach captains and organize cleanups throughout the Puget Sound region. So what is international coastal cleanup? It's Ocean Conservancy's International Coastal Cleanup. It's a cleanup effort that partners with organizations and individuals around the globe and is the largest volunteer project in service to our oceans. It started in 1986, and its first year was in Texas with 2,800 volunteers. Volunteers remove trash from the world's beaches and waterways, document the sources of debris, and promote behavior change to prevent marine litter in the first place. Globally, over 800,000 volunteers participate in ICC annually and remove millions of types of debris and record them as well. And that's on detailed data cards or on the CleanSwell app. And the data is then compiled into a global report. And that shows trends in data accumulation and can inform specific solutions to protect our waterways. Visualizing cleanup data also helps educate the public about the pervasive problem of marine trash. So next slide, please. Here are some items that we found last year. And this is the summary of last year's findings. Right now, we don't have the summary of this year's findings since it just happened so recently. So later we'll dive into a specific cleanup location. But right now, this is the summary from 2020. These are the top 3 items. We had cigarette butts, food wrappers, and bottle caps, and 3,008 pounds of trash. And then these other items listed here are items that we found last year that pertain to legislation that Alyssa will be talking about. The passing of legislation, we hope to see less of these items. So less plastic bags and small pieces of plastic with the reusable bag bill, and less styrofoam takeout containers, small pieces of plastic and styrofoam, and utensils with the plastics and recycling bill. Next slide, please. So we just had our International Coastal Cleanup on September 18th this year. We also had some cleanups from during the weekend before and after, and we'll continue to have a couple after that as well, since we were collecting data in September and October. And so we're still putting together our data and have some, like I said, have some more cleanups. But so far we've had 16 sites, 168 volunteers, and 811 pounds of trash. So here are some of the sites that we had. In terms of the site that we led, Puget Soundkeeper, we had a cleanup at Carkeep Park. And we also organized a lot of other cleanups and trained beach captains to lead their own cleanups, both private and public. And so these are all of the other cleanups. In terms of our Carkeep cleanup, we collected 28 pounds. And I can't tell you what we found the most of yet, but I can tell you what we found the most of for our Myrtle Edwards cleanup. So next slide, please. Here's a lovely picture from Carkeek. Next slide, please. So since we don't have all of the data compiled for this year's ICC, I thought we could zoom in into one of our ICC sites and see what we found there. So there were 2 cleanups at Myrtle Edwards, and something I noticed was a lot of tiny pieces of trash, like the trash shown in this picture, a lot of bottle caps, and just really small pieces of plastic. So if we look at the top 5 items, I got this from the data from the Clean Swell app that's already up, but we have small pieces of plastic, cigarette butts, food wrappers, plastic bottle caps, takeout containers. In total, we had 1,325 items collected for those 2 cleanups. And although this is only a snapshot of what we were finding, we find these items on a lot of our cleanups and our kayak patrols, in addition to other items like plastic bags, styrofoam, things like that. So in order to stop continuously seeing this debris in the field, we need to make larger scale changes like passing legislation. So with that, after we've seen the problem in the field and the results from ICC this year, I'd like to pass it on to Alyssa, who will talk more about the solutions and legislation.
Great, thanks so much, Gillian. And I'm going to transition to share my presentation. Let's see. Here we go. All right. Clicked on the share and it looks like it's slowly going through. Am I screen sharing? Gillian, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it? Okay, thank you. All right. Well, thank you for that great update. And thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I'm excited to see we've got 20 clean water supporters here, I assume anyway. So how many people here in the room enjoy swimming, paddling, hiking around the Sound, biking around the Sound, or doing other activities that get you out on or near the water? You can raise your virtual hand at the bottom of your screen. There's a reaction where you can do the hand raise feature. You could pop your video on if you're comfortable and wave your hand. Okay, I'm seeing lots of hands and thumbs up. I see Doug waving and Keith thumbs up. Okay, great. So that's awesome. Everybody here cares about Puget Sound. So we're all advocates for clean water or supporters of clean water. And I think that's great. So first of all, from one water protector to another, thank you. You know, we couldn't do the work we do without people who care and use our waters. Now, how many of us in the room, if you want to raise your hand a second time, have been out on a cleanup lately, or just seen litter around on the ground when you're walking or going? I still see hands up. I don't know if they're still there from the last one or this one, but I see some new hands. Okay, so we've all seen litter or marine debris out there in our water or on the streets. And I'm gonna bet it was plastic. And why is that? 80% of global marine debris is plastic. Those who've been on our cleanups will know that, because we tally down what we collect. And year over year, the top 10 items are plastic items. Plastic comes in many forms. We've got expanded polystyrene products. Some folks know this as styrofoam. That's the trademark name. These are common items that we find. We find pieces of foam on our cleanups, and these are some of the sources. Got plastic packaging. We've got bottles, containers, and those mailing envelopes, right? Plastic food products and utensils. Those ketchup and mustard packages, those are plastic. And then microplastics, little bitty pieces, 5 millimeters or less of plastic, because plastics are forever products. They don't break down, they break up into little pieces, and they stick around for a long time. And we're finding microplastics, as Gillian could probably tell you, because we also do microplastic sampling and analysis. In 98 or more % of the samples we're taking throughout Puget Sound, there are microplastics, and a lot of that is fibers. So these are scary statistics, or these are scary facts about microplastics. But I've got some even bigger ones. Every minute, a garbage truck amount of plastic gets dumped into our oceans and waters. I've also heard the stat that that's 2 garbage trucks every minute. And that's so hard to conceptualize. Another stat I've heard is that it's 8 million tons a year of plastic that is getting into our waters, and that by 2050, we could have more plastic in our oceans than fish by weight, which is unacceptable, right? There's a big problem. But this is not an unsolvable problem, which is just what Gillian was saying. We see this in the field, but we also fight this in other forums to help stop it. So what are the solutions, and what can we as water protectors do about this global plastic pollution problem? So my name is Alyssa Barton, and I'm the policy manager at Puget Soundkeeper. And today I'm going to talk about a few strategies to stop plastic pollution. Then we're going to talk about how to codify those types of strategies into law. So at one point or another, you all have probably learned about our state legislative process. We thought it would be great to give a refresher and a sort of a deep dive into how laws get passed. And we're going to give an example of a law that we helped pass in 2020, the reusable bag bill that became signed into law in May 2020 by the governor, and it's going to ban plastic bags statewide. Very exciting. Though it was signed into law last year, it was delayed, and it's going into effect Friday, October 1st, just this Friday. It was delayed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So after we cover these topics, my goal is to have everyone here feel confident about our state legislative process, to the point where you feel like you can at least summarize some bullets on the process to folks you know. You'll understand the plastic bag ban, why we fought for it, and why it's important. And you'll be excited, I hope, to attend our next 2 Advocacy 101 events. The second one is going to be on October 20th, another Wednesday, 5:30, 6:30. And the final one will be November 10th. We're hoping to do an in-person workshop, but that may end up going online as well. So this presentation should run about 30 minutes. If you have questions at any point in time, please type them in the chat, but please know I cannot see the chat. Because I am in presenter mode, all I can see are my slides. So if you don't feel comfortable putting your chat in the chat box, then just hold on to that for a verbal Q&A at the end. We will do a Q&A for about 10 minutes at the end. So again, either way you want to communicate with us, but unfortunately I won't be able to pause as I go. So we'll kick it off with some strategies that all of us as water protectors can do to help address plastic pollution. Back on August 30th, actually, Gillian and I gave a presentation. Gillian gave a beach captain training to folks interested in helping us on cleanups. And afterwards, I talked a little bit about these types of strategies that we at Soundkeeper implement to help stop plastic pollution. But here we go again. For those who weren't with us, because most of you were not, we can ban harmful products or chemicals, right? This is a no-brainer. You've got something that's toxic or that's causing a big problem. Let's try to ban it if there's safe alternatives. A second strategy is to change systems. Implement systemic change so that we can stop harmful products or chemicals from becoming pollution or getting into our waters. And a third tactic is clean it up. You've got pollution there, we're going to need to clean it up. Just turning off the tap doesn't mean that legacy pollution isn't still there. Now, this isn't intended to be an exhaustive list, it's just an overview. And my work focuses on the first two strategies, but we also at Soundkeeper do work on cleanups. A lot of our advocacy is in support of the cleanup of the Duwamish Superfund site, for example. So all three of these strategies can be implemented to protect the environment by codifying them into law at the local, state, or federal level, depending. And it just so happens that in the past few years, Soundkeeper and our partners have been successful in passing laws implementing several of these strategies to stop plastic pollution. Today, we're going to talk about how we helped pass SB 5323, which was the Reusable Bag Act. It's going to be banning plastic bags throughout the state of Washington. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the legislature and how it works. Now, I am going to pop up the participants list so I can still see you here on my screen, because I want to ask, how many folks here feel confident that you could share your understanding with us in a few sentences or less about how the legislative process works? I see a few hands, and I don't know if they were there before or if they're new hands. So I see Douglas, Shannon, and Blair with their hands raised. So, and Heather, you. So how about Douglas? Do you want to go on the spot and share with us in a few sentences how the legislative process works? Are you comfortable with that? I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't want to be on the spot. I saw a thumbs down from Shannon. She doesn't want to share.
I just unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Basically, the legislature responds to the public, and it's primarily through individual members of the legislature that represent us. Each of us has, I think we have, I think there's two or three legislators who represent each of us that we vote for and elect. And we go to them with our concerns. And if we can convince them that it's a concern that needs to be acted on, then they propose the legislation.
That's great.
And
that's a great quick summary.
And part of it is we tell them what the concern is and kind of feed the information to them so they can then act on it.
You got it. Well, all right. Thank you so much, Douglas.
Sure.
All right. So that was a really great summary, and I'm going to dig deeper into just that. So we're going to start off talking about the legislature, and we're going to focus on the Washington State Legislature today. The Washington State Legislature is made up of two houses, as you all know, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Here in Washington State, we have 49 legislative districts, each of which elects one senator and two representatives. So wherever you live right now, you're going to have two representatives in the House that represent you, and you're going to have one senator at the state level. We're not talking about the local folks who represent you, and we're not talking about federal Congress today, just the state. So the senators serve 4-year terms and representatives serve 2-year terms. That's different from Congress. Senate and House representatives meet in session each year to create laws, just like Douglas was talking about. At our next Advocacy 101 event in October, we're going to talk about how to identify and contact your electeds, including your state representatives. Today, we're just going to talk about how the legislative process really works. So the lawmaking cycle is 2 years long. Within that 2-year cycle or biennium, there's two types of legislative sessions. There's regular sessions and extraordinary sessions. Extraordinary sessions can also be called special sessions. Regular sessions are mandated by the state constitution, and they begin the second Monday in January. So this year, or this coming year in 2022, that'll be January 10th, will be the first day of the legislative session. Special sessions or extraordinary sessions are called by the governor to address specific issues. So while in the regular session, you're going to have your regular bill making and budgeting, Special sessions or extraordinary sessions can be called specifically just by the governor to address hot topics like COVID-19 or other emergencies, and they can happen really anytime within the 2-year cycle, but no more than 30 days. So in Washington, again, we get started the second Monday in January, and odd numbered years like 2021 are state budget years, and they end in April. They run 105 days. In even numbered years, like 2022, we call that a short session. The legislature only meets for 60 days because they aren't doing the budget, so it doesn't take quite so long. At the start of the session, and this is important, both houses agree on dates by which bills have to be reported out of their committees in order to be eligible for further consideration in the legislature. This is called the cutoff date for bills. And this is really important when you're advocating on a piece of legislation, because you need to know the deadline by which the bill needs to pass out of its committee. If it doesn't pass out of its committee by that time, it could die, or essentially it's not going to move forward. Every law starts out as a bill. On this slide, actually, I've put an image of the first part of SB 5323, the reusable bag bill, or the plastic bag ban. You probably can't read it. It's not intended for you to be able to read it. It's just sort of a snip of what a bill looks like so that you can see it. This is the Senate version of the bill. There was also a House version of the bill, and that commonly happens. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So, why laws? Sort of fundamentally to what Douglas was talking about, every law is born out of a problem that needs a solution. First, somebody needs to become aware of a problem, and that problem should be sort of the type and the scope that legislation is needed to fix it, like a pretty broad, far-reaching problem. Second, that person can either research and brainstorm solutions that they want to bring to an elected official to tell them about the problem, or they can just bring the problem straight to their legislator. That's really it. You don't have to be a legislator. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be a policy wonk or even an adult to identify a problem that's affecting you or your community and that is of statewide importance and that might need a legislative solution. We all have that authority and that agency. So maybe you rent an apartment and you're worried about a flood of new local development proposals and how that might negatively affect the environment in your community. Or maybe you own a small business and you want to support a statewide building law for greener buildings. Or maybe you're a student or a teacher or just any citizen in the state of Washington, any Washingtonian who cares about stopping plastic pollution and thinks the federal government needs to do more about it. In each instance, there's a potential solution through legislation, and it might not get solved otherwise. I love this little cartoon because it is straight from the Washington State Legislature's webpage, and it maps out the life of a bill with this cute little bill cartoon. And it might be a little bit hard for you to read on the screen, but that's okay because I'm going to walk through it. A bill can be drafted by an individual, a lobbyist, or a legislator. Really, anyone could prepare a draft bill and share it with their elected officials, but more often than not, drafts are prepared by a legislative aide or an assistant working in the legislature, someone with policy expertise. So this first image on the top left part of the screen of the little bill saying hello is explaining that the first thing that happens with the bill will be on the floor of either the House or Senate is introduction and referral to a committee. So this is also referred to the bill's first reading. And it's important to know bills have to have 3 readings in each house, the House of Representatives and the Senate, in order to pass the legislature. So leadership in the committee or leadership in the House or Senate will determine the bill committee assignments, usually based on the bill's subject matter. So for example, if we wanted to bring our bill, the reusable bag bill, because it deals with clean water and marine debris, it would be assigned to the Senate Environment, Energy and Technology Committee or the House Environment and Energy Committee. They have slightly different names here in the state of Washington. It's Senate Environment, Energy and Technology, or House Environment and Energy. Those are typically where a lot of the bills that Soundkeeper advocates for are held because they deal with water quality. Once assigned to a committee, the committee will research the bill, and the chair of the committee will work with legislative leadership to schedule those bills to be heard in the committee. They'll research, they'll discuss them. They might have work sessions where issues are determined and reviewed. They might have public hearings where folks like you and I or any member of the public can come in and testify, or they might call a panel of experts to testify. And they can also hold executive sessions. That's where the committee will decide how they want to report the bill to the whole House, again, either the House of Representatives or the Senate, by taking a vote. So not all bills are going to get scheduled by a hearing by their committee. So a good number of bills, they might not ever get any further than committee. Bills that do move forward will receive a committee report, and they'll usually be reported as do pass, which means the committee's decided to pass the bill just as it is. Do pass as amended, which means the committee has amended the bill and passed it out. Or do pass substitute, meaning they scrapped and substituted that bill and they are passing it substituted. As the bill moves through the committee process, staff also prepare a bill report. The bill report includes a legislative history of the bill, background on the issue, summary of the legislation, all kinds of fun information. When the bill moves to the opposite house, that house will also prepare a bill report. And these can be found online. And I think this is kind of fun. So I wanted to show you information you can find about a piece of legislation. First, in order to find any piece of legislation, you can go to app.leg or leg.wa.gov /billinfo. And that address is on this slide. And you can search by bill number right up here in this little box that I've got the red circle around. So for example, if we wanted to search for the reusable bag bill, we would type in 5323. This is what will come up, or at least the first part of the page that will come up. It shows you information at the top about the bill sponsors, Rolfus, Braun, Patton. It gives a description of the bill. And down here at the bottom in this circle is where we have the bill reports. So those are all clickable links that you can find more information out about a bill. Once a bill's been reported by the appropriate committee to the floor will act on the committee report and pass the bill to Rules Committee. And that will be this third little box description in our cute little comic with Mr. Bill the Bill. The Rules Committee is where leadership exercises the most control over the bill process. Rules Committee is made up of members from both parties, and each member of the committee gets to select just 2 or 3 bills that will move on to the next step in the process. Rules Committee decides which bills will be scheduled for a second reading. Remember earlier I said a bill will get 3 readings, right? So selected bills will probably require some debate. They're going to get placed on the regular calendar. If your bill doesn't get picked, unfortunately, it can stall in rules. If your bill does get a second reading and move forward, at that time, the entire House, whether it's in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, folks can offer amendments. If a bill's been amended in committee or on the floor of the first house, it's ordered engrossed. Third reading is where roll call and final vote is taken on the floor, which will determine the fate of your bill in that specific house, whether it will move on to the next house or not. If the bill passes the third reading by the cutoff date, here we are down in the bottom left-hand corner of our image with Mr. Bill, it'll go on to the next house. If not, it may have died. Once crossing over to the opposite house from where it originated, the bill needs to move through that second house and go through the same process. If the bill gets amended in the second house, the first house has to concur. That's the image here with Mr. Bill. That means that they have to agree on the amendments, and leadership is going to help make that determination. Leadership will place bills returning from the second house on a concurring calendar or concurrence calendar, whether it's in the Senate or the House. And then 3 things can happen from there. This is where there's been amendments made to a bill in the second house. If the first house concurs with the amendments, the bill has passed the legislature. If the first house disagrees with the second house, it can ask them to recede from the amendments. And if they do, great, we've got an agreement. But if they can't resolve their differences, they can ask for a conference committee. So it gets a bit complicated, but it's all about trying to resolve differences and reach an agreement on a basically compromise. Once a bill has finally passed the legislature, it is enrolled. The bill will be signed by various leadership members and then finally sent to the governor for his or her action. Here we go at the end. Now, I'm so sad to tell you that even if a bill has made it through this horribly long gauntlet that I have just explained, it can die. The bill can be killed by the governor, who can choose to veto all or part of it if he so chooses. If the governor decides to veto the bill, the legislature can override that, but that is pretty rare. Doesn't often happen. If the governor doesn't act on a bill, it will go into effect as though signed. From the governor's desk, it goes to the Secretary of State, who will assign it with a session law. And interestingly, earlier I mentioned that our legislative sessions or our bill cycles are 2-year cycles. Legislature works on 2-year cycles, short and long session. So if a bill doesn't make it through its first year in that biennium, it could make it through the second year as a carryover bill. And that's what happened with the plastic bag ban. We introduced the bill 1 year, didn't pass, got it in the next year. We'll skip to that shortly. Before we do that, I feel like I've just talked an awful lot, and I want to make sure everyone has some key takeaways, because again, the goal is that folks can leave here tonight and feel pretty confident in their ability to sort of summarize quickly to friends some key points on the legislative process. So, quick recap that will hopefully help us do that. First, in the legislative process, the bill gets introduced and it'll be assigned to a committee. Second, the bill will get 3 readings in its house of origin. It'll get referred to a committee. Committee will hear it. The committee report will be prepared, and the floor will act on the committee report and pass the bill to rules. Second, gets through rules. Third, roll call on the House or Senate floor, where all legislators vote for or against the bill. Next step in the process, if it passes by cutoff deadline, if it gets voted out on its floor vote, it will cross over to the opposite house to commence the same process. Again, we'll need 3 readings. Proposed amendments in the second house can be passed by agreement or conference committee with the first house. Then the bill is enrolled, and finally, the bill goes to the governor's desk to be signed into law or vetoed. Whew. So you can see why many, many, many bills will get introduced into legislature and may never see the light of day. They may not become law. You really need to get a lot of folks enthusiastic about the issue and enthusiastic about the solution in order to get through this gauntlet. So now I'm going to talk about the real life example that we helped pass last year, the reusable bag bill. So first, I'll take you back in time a few years to 2017. 3 organizations, Soundkeeper, Zero Waste Washington, and Surfrider, got together and formed a coalition. We're now called Plastic Free Washington. We brainstormed and looked at plastic pollution problems affecting Puget Sound and all of our waters. After looking at a lot of different issues and marine debris problems, we identified plastic bags as being a ubiquitous problem that we were seeing on all of our cleanups. Like Gillian mentioned some of the statistics from our cleanups. Year over year, we're seeing plastic bags in the top 10 list of most frequently found items on our cleanups. And this is not just here in Washington or in Puget Sound. This is throughout the entire country and around the world. Plastic bags are getting into our waters and our environment at a very high rate. So we also took a look at just how nasty these things are and how we really do not need them. So plastic bags are made from petrochemicals, dirty fossil fuels. Many people might not realize this, but the same companies who are contributing to global climate change the most and pumping dirty fuels out of our planet are transitioning in some cases to producing plastics because plastics are made of the same petrochemical products. Plastic bags are usually only used for about 6 minutes from when you grab them at the register to when you throw them away at home or put them in a ball and hope to recycle them. It's usually about 6 minutes, but they last for years and years. And again, they don't break down, they break up, which we talked about earlier. Folks who put plastic bags in the recycling sometimes don't realize that if they aren't properly balled up, and even sometimes when they are, they can clog recycling machinery because the thin film gets into the gears and can cause slowdowns. The Department of Ecology actually has some statistics on this, costing the state quite a bit of money for when plastic bags end up jamming the recycling machinery. And so it doesn't really surprise me then to learn that only 9% of our plastics, total, all plastics, including plastic bags, but other products too, get recycled. So, not that you needed convincing, but now you know plastic bags have got to go, and reusable bags are the way of the future. So that's why we came up with the BYOB, bring your own bag, hashtag and logo. And some of our coalition members spearheaded local efforts to pass local bag bans in different counties and cities until after a few years, I think something like 39 different municipalities had gone ahead and taken the initiative to implement different forms of bag bans or fees. And over the years, we also expanded our coalition. We're now 7 groups strong. It's Soundkeeper, Zero Waste Washington, Surfrider in Washington, Seattle Aquarium, Environment Washington, Oceana, and Latino Community Fund are all members of our steering committee now. And we now actually have a website as well. So exciting, plasticfreewa.org. So what did we have to do to get this concept, a plastic bag ban, passed into law? It took a lot of work. It took a lot of public pressure and all of those local bans, because the more municipalities that implemented the bans, the more the tide would turn to push for statewide legislation. If nobody is doing something, it's hard to convince the legislature it's a good idea. When a lot of people are doing it, it's not as hard to convince the state legislature, this is a great idea. Look, folks are already doing it. Building relationships with key legislators was also really important. Senators Christine Rolfes and Mona Das, as well as Representative Strom Peterson, were some of our original bill champions. Later on, Liz Berry in 2020 became a champion of this bill. Mona Das is really also a plastics champion. I just have to give her a shout out. She continues to work with our coalition and others on solving plastic pollution problems, and she's just so passionate about this issue. It's lovely. We also built relationships with forward-thinking municipalities and representatives of grocers and other industries. And that was what really helped get this bill across the line. The bill was introduced on January 17, 2019. And though we couldn't pass it in the first year because the bill wasn't called up for a vote, we were able to move it through the legislature through final passage and signed into law May of 2020. As I mentioned earlier, because of COVID, the bag bill was delayed from being implemented, but now everyone should get ready to bring your own bag, stock up and make sure you keep your totes in your car or bike or whatever method you use of getting to the grocery store, because it will go into effect this Friday the 1st. And what it's going to do, it will ban those thin film plastic bags that you can see in this image down here on the bottom left of my screen. Those thin, flimsy bags from grocery and retail stores. It does allow grocers to use a thicker plastic bag, 2.25 mil thick, which is the type of bag that you could really carry a lot of heavy stuff or pointy things and not worry about it ripping or breaking because it's truly reusable. And retailers will also be able to provide at the register a paper bag that contains a certain amount of recycled content. So once you get to the register, there still will be options for folks who forget their bags at home, but there will be an 8-cent pass-through charge. Now, why is that important? The 8-cent pass-through charge is important for 2 reasons. One, it's going to help the retailers and store owners because it will help pay for the cost of the bags. And 2, it will help dissuade folks from purchasing them, hopefully, because they're not going to be free anymore, right? So when you have to, I have to pay 8 cents for this bag, hopefully that's a deterrent for some folks and encourages people to bring their own bags from home. Now, the bag bill does have some exemptions. For example, there will be some bags that are still allowed for hot foods, sloppy foods, foods where there could be a sanitary issue, or some other products that are smaller. And there is a exemption for the 8-cent pass-through charge for anyone who's enrolled in a food assistance program, so that they don't become burdened by this additional charge. But, a reporter just asked me yesterday about this, and I cited quite a few data points. Bag bans are effective. They do work. Other municipalities in California, in Colorado, in Washington, D.C., Chicago, and then other countries too that have banned bags have seen success in the form of reduced consumption of plastic bags and reduced litter. So for example, the California bag ban reduced the use of plastic bags. Now, opponents say, okay, well, California banned these film bags, but they allowed the thicker bags, and folks started purchasing more of other types of bags, for example, like trash bags. But a researcher in, I think, 2016 took a look at this data and found that even when you accounted for the additional purchases of different types of plastic bags, the bag ban was so effective that there was overall a 71.5% reduction in bag consumption. And that reduction kept 100% of all those bags out of the environment. So that's pretty good, if I do say so. So before I move on, I would just reiterate, with any piece of legislation, what our lessons learned have been over the last few years where we've been able to pass some plastics laws, is that having legislative champions is very important. You need to be able to talk to your legislator and find someone who's really fired up on the issue you care about, and that's going to help contribute to the potential for success. You also need state, or a second piece would be state or broad support for the solution is also going to be really helpful. Diverse supportive constituents. Again, we had folks from different sectors and from the grocers themselves that were supportive or neutral on this, and that was key. And when I say neutral, that's another key point. To be able to win a legislative success, one of the lessons we've learned is that you've got to address potential downsides. You've got to predict potential downsides, and you've got to address concerns and issues that interested stakeholders have, so that they won't want to try to take your bill down. And if you can do that, there's a higher likelihood of success. So, Soundkeeper banned plastic bags with our partners. We helped ban plastic bags. And in 2020 or 2021, just this past year, we also passed a bill that is going to do a lot of really exciting things. It's another product ban, but it goes a little bit farther. In addition to banning certain expanded polystyrene foam products, coolers, packing peanuts, and take-home food containers, for example, it included a few other forward-thinking pieces, like establishing recycled content requirements for certain types of plastic packaging. And that's going to be really important because we want to step away from using virgin products or creating new plastics and reusing the plastic that we have to encourage and increase recycling. That's what happened in 2021. Now, what are we looking forward to in 2022 that we hope you all might be interested in getting behind? That would be extended producer responsibility, or EPR. So it's great that we've banned some harmful products because, again, that is a key strategy that is important to implement and is very effective, but it is not the ultimate solution. Product bans aren't the end all be all. We can't ban our way out of this plastic pollution problem that we have. So personally, my vision for the future is a world where we recycle, reduce, and reuse as much as we possibly can, but in the other order, reuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, because we've got to stop and slow down our consumption and our use of products in the first place. EPR, or extended producer responsibility, is a policy approach under which producers are given the responsibility, whether financial or actually physical, for the treatment and disposal of post-consumer products. This takes the responsibility off consumers, you, me, the public, for the handling of products at the end of their life. This essentially shifts that responsibility and cost off of us to the plastics producers. So EPR systems, in principle, can provide incentives to prevent waste at the source, asking them to reduce the amount of products or contents that are used in their products, promoting more efficient and eco-friendly product design, and supporting the achievement of public recycling and materials management goals. So increase the amount of garbage that is getting recycled, reduce the amount of garbage, increase recyclables that are getting to the recycling facility and getting recycled. Because right now, a lot of stuff that people are tossing in the bins are not actually getting recycled. There's a lot of wish cycling. Unfortunately, there's been some consumer confusion over a little symbol that is like a triangle or chasing arrows symbol that's placed on packages. It does not mean the product is recyclable. If you see a plastic item or other item and think this might be recyclable, that the presence of that little triangle symbol does not mean that it's recyclable. It is unfortunate, but this has caused a lot of confusion. And folks sometimes just look at something and say, oh, this looks like maybe it's recyclable. Let me hope that it is. And they toss it into their bin. Unfortunately, it's not. Usually in that circumstance, it's usually not. And as a result, for example, I think in 2018, China has rejected our recyclables from the US, which we would ship over there, because they've decided to not accept any recycling from countries that can't keep it to 5% or less contamination. And our recyclables were way more contaminated than that. So that is also why the EPR, extended producer responsibility system, starts to look more attractive. In that type of world, if we have an effective EPR system in place, we'll end up with using less virgin materials, more products actually getting recycled, more products using recycled materials, and less products ending up in our landfills, in our environment, and in Puget Sound. So we might not have as many cleanups to do, which won't be as fun, but then we can turn our attention to other problems. So I think that sounds like a great idea. And if you think that sounds like a good idea, I hope you'll join me in fighting for a plastic pollution-free future. We're going to wrap it up now. We're getting pretty close on time. I'm sorry we started a couple minutes late, but just 2 more minutes. So what can you do to advocate for clean water right now or in the very near future? You can take action on our current issues on our website. Just click Take Action. You can sign up for our next 2 Advocacy 101 events at Eventbrite. All of y'all registered for today's event. So if you go back to that original page, you might notice there's 2 other events happening on October 20th and November 10th. if you didn't register for them separately, you do need to register for them separately, or we won't have you marked down as an attendee. Hopefully you'll actually attend those next 2 events. And in February 22, we'll be hosting another Clean and Abundant Waters Lobby Day event. We might need support for this event, either helping get it set up and volunteering, or helping attend day of. So if that's something that sounds exciting to you, yes, let's do it. And finally, you can get to know your legislators and make sure they know your priorities, like shifting to an EPR system, attend local town halls, call or visit your electeds in Olympia. If you don't feel comfortable doing that yet, do not worry. Attend our next 2 Advocacy 101 events, and hopefully you will. We're going to talk about advocacy. We're going to talk about contacting your legislators, how to track them down. And then in November, we're going to do a comment writing workshop. Now, those folks from today who attend all 3 of our events will be invited to participate in our lobby day and get a cool Octo t-shirt. I don't know if folks can see my super cool Octo t-shirt because I can't see myself. I've just been presenting to a slide this whole time, which is really awkward, but it's really cool. It says protect and preserve Puget Sound. It has this really rad octopus on it. So the first 10 of you all who make it through October 20 and November 10 and send in a letter to your legislator will get a shirt. So with that, we're going to do Q&A, questions and answer period. Thank you so much for bearing with us. And most of y'all have stuck through to the end. I'm going to stop my screen share now. All right, Gillian, you want to join me on audio for our Q&A? Does anyone have questions about this? I see 2 hands raised, so I'm gonna assume that you have questions. Should we call Shannon since Douglas has spoken, but then Douglas can go second? Shannon, do you have a question for us? Shannon, support at Maxwell.
Oh, no, I don't know why I had a hand up.
Okay, no
No
problem.
questions.
Might have stuck up from earlier.
Thanks.
Douglas, do you have a question, or is your hand also just a remnant from our last conversation?
Yeah, I was curious. You talked about the bill reports that were on the website. You went over that pretty quickly. What do you find in bill reports?
Yeah, you can find the whole history of the legislation. You can find how legislators voted on it, amendments that were made, rationale behind the bill, why it's an issue. It's a really great resource. I enjoy reading those because you can get a quick snapshot of the bill in the beginning and then find the history below it.
Does it tell you about anything that's coming up in the future on the bill, or, in other words, it's coming up for a vote or something like that?
That's a great question. It doesn't, but on that website, it will post in green linkable text. I think it's under bill history. It will tell you when there is a hearing set, and you can subscribe for alerts. So let's say there's a bill coming up that you're really interested in. Let's just say it's bill 1111, and you want to subscribe to find out when there's going to be a hearing. You can type that into find the bill. The bill will come up, and then you can subscribe for alerts for it. And make sure if you do that, that you also look at the companion bill. So as I mentioned, you can introduce a bill in the House or the Senate, but it's going to cross over at some point, and sometimes 2 versions will get dropped, one in the House, one in the Senate. So you want to find the companion bill, which will be listed at the top of the page for any bill that will link to that other House, because you'll want an alert for that too.
So does that tell you when you can go and either sit in on the hearing or even testify?
Yes, and hearings are recorded, and they also play live on tvw.org, which is the court, I guess, TV station. Yeah, so it's nice to sometimes be able to listen in live. or you can learn about opportunities to testify that way too.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. As members of our listserv or of Soundkeeper's listserv, if you're interested in testifying in the future, follow us through this Advocacy 101 series, and we will reach out to folks with opportunities to testify when they come up. And sometimes it can be kind of short notice. Excuse me, I'm fighting a little bit of a tickle. All right, Brandon, do you have a question? Oh, and I also see one from Lydia. So let's take Brandon and Lydia, and then I think we should probably wrap up because we are at the 6:30 hour. So Brandon, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Gillian, for presenting tonight. I was wondering about something you said about how to get people excited about a policy idea, because you mentioned how important having an active constituency behind this sort of thing is for getting legislators involved. And I imagine that's, of course, easier with something like a plastic bag ban, where you can see the problem, you can work on it directly, or in a way that feels very direct to people, versus something like extended producer responsibility, which could seem more vague and hard to deal with. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how to create that passionate group of people for something with a less obvious procedure.
Yeah, that is such a good question. And I think it's all about messaging. And I think figuring out a way to get concise talking points and bullets out about the issue and why it matters is really key. And a second thing that we've found, which is unfortunate but true, is that sometimes something has to happen to shake people up. So, for example, the China sword policy, where China decided to reject our recyclables, that was a big opportunity for people to start realizing, like, oh no, what are we going to do with our recycling? If something big happens in the news and there is a solution presented, people will pay a lot more attention that way. This actually happened back in 2017, 2018, when we had, folks may remember, an Atlantic salmon net pen collapse in Puget Sound. We had 250,000 Atlantic salmon release and escape into Puget Sound, and it was a big issue. That's an issue folks have been advocating on for years to try to deal with the pollution issues coming from those pens. And because it was in the news and because it was a big catastrophe, it was like, splash, okay, now is the time. And we were able to help end up phasing out that practice, which was great. It can absolutely be tricky. I think my end point would be trying to find a way to articulate the problem and the solution in a way that resonates with your audience, whoever it is, in a way that's sort of concise and clear. Hopefully I did that with the EPR topic in this presentation. It is a tough one, for sure. And then the final question we'll take is, are there any key legislators that were behind the bag ban that you might expect might champion the next EPR bill? That's Lydia. Thank you for that question. That is really great. We are hopeful that legislators that we've worked with will want to champion the next EPR bill. Mona Das and Liz Berry would be folks that we would be interested in talking to for sure. And so we will see. And hopefully this will be an opportunity for us to bring this policy in 2022. Wow, getting ahead of myself. Yeah, we're hoping to bring this next year, and we're hoping that folks are still behind it, but it will just depend on a lot of variables. So we should know in the next few months. All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for your patience and attendance. For the first folks that joined us today, we're gonna have Gillian contact you by the end of the week for a free brown bear car wash. Woohoo! Free car wash, keeping those car chemicals out of Puget Sound. And we really hope to see you at the next one. We hope you found this useful. If you want to give us feedback, please feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. Happy to hear ways we can improve or things that you want to learn next time. Bye, everybody.